Then go over briefly the start information system, and then the roles of various people: the start referee, chief starter, what a starter's duties are, the recallers, and starter's assistants. So the start rules, for 400 meters or less, it must use a crouch start. In other words, blocks, commands, on your marks, and then set. In English or in French or in your own language is the way the rules are written. In Canada, that basically means English or French because those are two languages spoken in Canada. So if you go to a national championship, for instance, if you have an English-speaking starter, you'll hear the commands in English, most likely. And if it's a French-speaking starter, you will most likely hear the commands in French. So in longer than 400 meters, you must use a standing start. If a starter is not satisfied already, you can abort the start by the command, stand up. When all are ready, the race is normally started by a report of a gun pointing upwards. So a crouch start, both hands and at least one knee must be in contact with the ground within their own lane after the command on your marks. Both feet need to be in contact with the foot plates of the blocks. So a starter may abort the start if there's an athlete that causes a start to be aborted, for example, by raising the hand before a gun is fired, or if the athlete delays placing themselves in their final starting position, or if an athlete disturbs by other athletes through sound, movement, or otherwise. Now, all of these three instances are could be considered misconduct, and where the starter has aborted the start, then the start referee has or might be warning the offending athlete for improper conduct by raising a yellow card. So with a false start, an athlete shall not commence their start until after receiving the report of the gun. Now, this means that you have to consider that there is a delay in reaction time, that an athlete cannot decide to go before the report of the gun. And it's impossible to have a reaction time of less than around 0.1 seconds. So if an athlete leaves the blocks in under 0.1 seconds after the report of the gun, that will still be a false start. It includes movement that was prior to the gun and not stopped, continuing into the commencement of the start. In other words, a rolling start. So an athlete comes up and has been still and then starts to move forward before the gun goes. And that will be a false start as well. In a crouch start, we frequently will have a twitch or a buck. And so the athlete comes up and moves, but does not leave the blocks, they stop their motion and do not lose the contact with their hands do not leave the ground, or the feet do not leave the blocks, and that should not be considered then a false start. In a standing start, if the feet leave the contact with the ground, that will be a false start as well. However, with the standing start, we must recognize that there's a possibility of overbalancing. So if it can also happen in a crouch start as well, but less likely. So if somebody comes to a start line and overbalances, loses their balance, we should not consider that as a false start either. So the penalty for a false start in an individual event, it's disqualification. And in a combined event, there's one false start per race is allowed, and then there's a disqualification for further false starts. A starter or recall starter needs to recall any of the start if it's not considered fair, and you're better off to recall a race than that there be an unfair start. This is, I'm just wondering now if there are questions, and I'm thinking that if there's any questions I can allow 2 or 3 questions and then go on for the start information system and the role of the various other position or various officials of the start. Okay, well then I will go to the next slide, start information system. A start information system, or SIS, if it is used, the start must be recalled if the SIS emits a signal after the start. There's no choice in that. And what will have happened is the false start system, or the start information system, will indicate a reaction time of less than 0.100 seconds for a particular lane. And the starter, if the start information system has been triggered, then the starters and recallers need to get together to make sure what has happened. The evidence from the SIS then is a resource to assist in making the correct decision. The SIS must be taken as factual unless there's a reason to believe that it's not, there's an obvious problem with the facts. One example would be if somebody has twitched or bucked and set the system off, they've recorded a false start and yet have not left their blocks. However, if, for instance, somebody has left the blocks, and for instance, if their reaction time was 0.09 seconds, chances are extremely good that that is a false start and they need to be charged with the false start. And there would be no recourse to that the system must be taken as factual unless there's a reason not to. The role of the various officials. The start referee is an assistant track referee to oversee the starts and is not part of the start team, but has the jurisdiction to decide on any facts related to the starts. So with the in conjunction with the photo finish, ensures the zero control test is conducted. That will be set up, and there'll be a gun fired by one of the starters. And if the start information system is used, we'll carry out initial check of the system, and we'll deal with any protests about a start. If a starter is aborted to start because of improper conduct by an athlete, the start referee may warn the responsible athlete. In a case like that, I would normally go and talk to the starter. Start referee should be positioned very close to the starter so that there can be immediate communication between the starter and the start referee. And if there's an immediate protest by an athlete, having been charged with a false start, the track referee may allow the athlete to compete under protest. And you notice the thing is the track referee may allow, doesn't have to allow. And however, if there's any doubt whatsoever, the track referee should probably allow the athlete to compete under protest to preserve the rights of the athlete. In Canada, we have a chief starter. If you look in the rule book, there is a position called start coordinator. And in Canada, those duties are split typically between the chief starter and the starter's assistant. And so the chief starter is typically is the manager of the start team and acts as a chief starter. If you look in the guidelines, the start coordinator may be a manager of the start team, but not necessarily act as a starter. But in almost all cases, we have the chief starter here as also one of the senior starters. So the chief starter allocates the duties and supervises the team members and plans the positioning of the starter and the recallers and the starter's assistants. Now for the starter will be typically on a stand, and it has a responsibility to ensure all athletes have a fair start. And if there's a false start, or an unfair start, we'll consult with the recallers. Has full visual control. Now in Canada, we very frequently start, for instance, on the infield, so we don't have visual control personally on all athletes. We delegate that to recall starters. So a starter will have visual control over a portion of the field, and the other portion of the field will be under the control of a recall starter. And of course, the recall starter then signals the starter when the athletes are ready. The starter ensures commands are heard simultaneously by all athletes. So if one athlete doesn't hear or there's a problem, it'll be unfair and there'll be a stand-up. Recallers are deployed to give an alternate view of the start so that we have 360-degree view of the athletes wherever possible. At a national meet, you typically will have about 4 starters, so that you'll have some to the front, some to the back, some to the side. Recallers support the starters, and if there's any doubt on the legality or fairness of the race, the recaller needs to recall the race. And then the starter's assistants, the starter definitely relies on them. They provide the management of the athletes in preparation for the race. They signal the starter when the athletes are ready for the starter's commands, and shows the cards after a starter is given a decision on recalls, such as false starts or no charge. Whenever there is a stand-up or a false start or any kind of recall, a card does need to be shown. It's for instance, those that have worked with me know that if there isn't a card and I've said stand up, chances are will say something like green card please, just so that all the athletes will see. And so I think that is pretty much what I wanted to say. This I'd like to open it up now for questions and discussion. I think we get a lot more out of the discussion and so on.
Hi, Ian. Stephen from Winnipeg here. I've got a question.
Yes. I can barely hear you.
I'll type it into the sidebar then.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay. My question was, in the slides you were showing, the last slide for the start referee, there was a reference, it said at the top, start referee, and then in the slide, it mentioned a track referee. Is that meant to be the same?
Yeah, the start referee is an assistant track referee.
Okay.
And if very frequently, when I work as a start referee, if I am a track referee and I do not have the personnel and I do not have an assigned assistant track referee to oversee the starts, in other words, I don't have a start referee, I will actually be down at the start line close to the starter, so that therefore I can act as a start referee.
Great, thanks so much.
Ian?
Yes.
Sorry, Jane Edstrom here.
Mm-hmm.
Just there is a new rule change this year in that the start referee is a referee assigned to the start. So it no longer has to be a track referee. But in the case that there is no start referee assigned, then you're very correct. A track referee should be close to the start to oversee the start and rule on any of the behavioral faults.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and just to follow up, since nobody else is jumping in at this point in time, if there is a start referee, they have sole ownership of the start. In other words, the track referee would not overrule the start referee.
Right.
And Ian, David Weicker here, just a comment. There are some significant nuances relating to para rules on start. And so you may want to mention that what you've been talking about and Jane's reference to the rules are for World Athletics, former IAAF only.
I had difficulty hearing the last couple sentences.
The comment was that the rules that you have quoted only apply to World Athletics, former IAAF, not World Para.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah, that's right. The World Para have a whole different set of rules.
Ian, Gilles Rochette speaking from Montreal. Do you hear me, Ian?
Yes, I do.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Just would like to mention that you were talking about the SIS system. And it's important to know that if there is a beep, when there's a start there, it's not automatically a false start. You mentioned that, but I would like to remind people that, before in the old days, it was automatically a false start when there was a beep with the SIS system, but it's not anymore. That's what I understand.
Yes.
It's not automatically a false start if it's if there is a beep with the SIS system.
Yeah, that is correct. When you look at the rule itself, I mean, yes, it has to be recalled. Under the note, it's when a World Athletics certified start information system is in operation, the evidence of this equipment shall be used as a resource by the relevant officials to assist in making a correct decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, for instance, if somebody moves or has a twitch or a buck, that can trigger the system, but you need to then look on the waveform to see why it's triggered, and you will see like a spike on the waveform, but you will not see the forceful pressure on the blocks that you will see if somebody was actually starting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Keith Hill here, Victoria.
Yes, hi Keith.
how do you determine, like you mentioned a buck or a twitch, whatever. Now, I'm not a starter very often, but most of our starts are involving young athletes, and 100% of the time we don't have the SIS equipment. So when you determine if a buck or a start, in my opinion, is not a false start according to the rules.
Right.
So anything like that, unless it draws other athletes out, then you might consider it.
And even where it has drawn another athlete, that that actually falls under this one here, like the third point. The athlete disturbs other athletes through sound, movement, or otherwise. So if I remember distinctly, it was a youth championship where lane 4 bucked, and it was a major disturbance. Lane 5 left the blocks. Lane 4, the starters were actually said that lane 4 was false started, and I remember I wasn't sure, was it a false start or was it a disturbance? Well, the athlete ran under protest, and when you looked at it on video, it was quite clear that it was movement, and they actually did not leave the blocks. So therefore, it was in effect a disturbance and not a false start.
And normally, you would just have the athlete stand up and restart.
Oh yeah, there was in a case like this where one athlete bucks, another one goes, you have to recall.
Yes.
There's no choice in that. It's just a matter now, what decision are you going to make? Is it going to be a false start because somebody actually has false started, or somebody bucked causing somebody to leave, or etc. And not always will you know what decision should be made, and that's where then you generally have a discussion amongst the starters, and you may have an athlete potentially run under protest and then review it on video.
Okay.
Hi, Ian. It's Rick from Lanceville.
Yeah, hi, Rick.
Hi. Ian, I wonder if you could just say a few more words about the point regarding the athlete delays placing themselves in the final starting position.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but occasionally an athlete will make the argument that, oh, it's part of their starting process, and you've got the other athletes already almost prepared for the set command. So if you could just maybe elaborate on that a little bit. Thank you.
My take on that is, if an athlete has delayed enough that they are affecting the race, then you need to address the issue. So if it's on your marks and you have 7 people in their blocks and somebody is still not in their blocks and it's going to be a few seconds, I will stand them up and give a warning. And in the case of set, if you've got 7 people ready to go and somebody is still rising, again, it affects the race. It needs to be a stand-up, and the athlete then warned. And when I say warned, that it's up to the start referee whether it becomes a yellow card or not. very frequently it won't, you know, at your local meets, you probably don't have a start referee, so you just, you warn the athlete and you hope it doesn't happen again. That
Thank
answer
you,
your
Ian.
question?
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate that.
Ian, David Weicker here again. Just a comment worth noting. Another resource for the starters and the start referee is the video referee, who is, if there's a video referee in action at the particular competition. And I can think of situations where the video referee has seen an athlete at the start line without a knee on the track, but a starter has not noticed it. And so the video referee could advise the start referee of that kind of activity or action immediately.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good point. I think that a starter needs to be cognizant of all sorts of different sources of information. And another one actually is the starter's assistants, that starter assistants sometimes will notice things like that as well.
Tom Norton, you have a question? Could you ask your question? Just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, sure, happy to. Thanks. I just wanted to put it out there, and
Yep.
perhaps you might get to it in a while, but just looking to see if you could comment on the first one. First question is the optimal positions on the field of play with regards to the starter. I think you mentioned that earlier, but then the recall starter and the starter's assistants and where they ought to be if there is one better position versus another.
Yeah, with regards to the starters, a certain amount of that is personal preference. Typically, you find most starters in Canada like to have at least a partial side view so that they can see a rolling start, if there is one. For 100, I know for 100 meters, my personal preference is on the inside, maybe roughly 10 meters back from the start line and about maybe 4 or 5 meters up the track. So it's mostly a side. If I place, my first recaller tends to be across the track from me. Second recaller, I like to have somebody behind the blocks so that they're in a position to see the back legs. And they're in a very good position then to see bucks and twitches. And then somebody further up the track to have an overview, like on the same side as the starter. And so that becomes my preference. For starters assistants, if you've got a full field, you want 2 people on the start line, the front, in front to start with, checking fingers, and then going behind the blocks to check the feet. And then if you've got 2, if you have the starter's assistant that's closest to the starter, move right back so that they're out of the vision of starter and recallers completely. And the starter assistant on the other side then signal the starter that everything is okay. And then modifications for other races as need be. But half the starts are the like with the 100-meter or 60 meters, etc. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that gives me a pretty good picture of what it might look like optimally if you had all of those resources at your disposal. That would work. No, good. Thank you.
I have another question here. Dave Keenan, please ask your question.
Yeah, that was Dave.
No, but Dave Keenan is asking a question. David, Dave Keenan.
Oh, that was Dave Keenan that just asked that
Oh,
question. I thought.
sorry. I'm going over. I'm trying to. Pritam, you have a question? Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I was just wondering, do we have any, what are the tests that normally are being done for the start information system? Do we do a test before and after competition, or what are the normal tests that you guys do? You mentioned that there were tests that are being done, right?
You're talking about the zero control test?
No, not the zero, but about the start information system, the one for the full start. Do you have any tests that we do before and after competition for that one also?
The start information system is something that certainly needs to be okay. I guess to start with, it needs to be certified by the World Athletics, the system itself, and then it needs to be set up. And there's a whole bunch of things that you need to make sure that the right lane is labeled and that type of thing. You need to know that the equipment is operating the way it should. And that's, of course, before the race. One of the last time that the start information system was used in Canada that I'm aware of was the 2016 Canadian Championships and Olympic trials. I don't think it's been used since. And one of the problems that we had on using it there was that there was a huge thunder shower, and some of the lanes basically didn't work anymore. They shorted out. So, but you do have a control system, and you will have the reaction times recorded if it's working. You'll also see the waveforms if it's working, and that's a whole it's a whole topic by itself.
Ian, Dave Keenan here.
Yeah, if you could speak up just a little bit.
Okay, I'll get us right to the microphone. Is that okay, Ian? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It's more of a comment I had for when an athlete is in the set position, that quite often that their feet are not making contact with both the plates, sometimes one, sometimes two, but it's more for the junior athletes I find too.
Yeah, for the senior athletes, I have found recently that they're pretty good. That they unless, yeah, for the most part, they do put their feet on the blocks. It's the inexperienced ones that I've had more problems with, to tell the truth. But if they kick their foot back and place their foot firmly on the foot plate of the blocks, it really should not be a problem.
Yes, again, more for the junior athletes.
Yeah, it's just something that they, you know, all athletes need to abide by that, and it's not, as I say, it's not that difficult to, if they're properly coached and so on, that they will not have a problem.
Agreed, yeah.
I have a question, Ian.
Bruce Burton, you have a question? Oh, he's back. Okay, next. Alicia Friday, you have a question? Alicia? 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 Next one. John Nolan, you have a question about false start occur?
Yes, thanks, Serge.
Okay.
Actually, I have two questions. My first question was, once a false start occurs, what rule do you write down? Is it 162.7 or 162.8, or does it matter? And my second question was regarding the false start the rule 162.3, when it says when you fire the gun between set and the firing the gun, there's no mention of the time. I was wondering if you could comment on your expertise on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, first of all, you're looking at the old rules, not the new ones. So it's 16.8. 16.7 is the definition of a false start, and 16.8 is the penalty for the false start.
I apologize, sir. I did have I have my 2018-2019 book. Sorry.
Yeah, no, in my mind, you put down the rule for the penalty, not the definition, because you have a different penalty for individual versus combined events. Your other question, you want, in order to make sure that athletes are ready, you need a certain amount of, certainly a good amount of time. It generally takes, this is a rule of thumb, it takes generally about 1.5 seconds or thereabouts for an athlete to reach their position, so that they're set. And then after that, it takes, then they relax a little bit. They come up, they settle a little bit, and only after they're completely settled are they really ready for the gun. And that generally takes somewhere 1.7 to 2.4 seconds is kind of the range that we would normally go by. And if there's a little bit of movement and so on, then we wind up even holding a bit longer till everybody is actually still. And it depends on the athletes themselves. but you definitely need to make sure everybody's up, still, settle, and then have, that way they have their optimum concentration.
Thank you very much.
John Stevenson, you have a question?
Serge.
Yes.
Hi, Ian.
Yeah,
It's
hi,
John.
Steve. Or, yeah. Sorry, John.
It's okay.
Hi, John.
Hi. My question was related. We've had this conversation before, but if we look at the typical European starters, they like to either start in front or from behind. How, given, I mean, the proper answer probably would be the recallers have the proper vantage point. But in the event you don't have recallers, how can they be expected to see forward motion in the blocks?
That's a real good question. And that is where, if I, the key part here is the starter needs to have full visual control. That's where the Europeans say you need to start in front or you need to start from behind. And you're right. If you've got a rolling start, you'll not see it. So you, and the other thing is, you notice the last point there, ensures commands are heard simultaneously. Well, if you're in front or behind, you'll not all athletes will hear simultaneously on a echelon start, because, you know, if they're 30 meters apart, well, there's a 1/10 of a second difference between hearing the commands and actually hearing the pistol, unless there's a silent gun and sound in all the blocks.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do, that does present problems. However, having said all that, if I'm the only starter, I am going to start in front or behind, because the most important part of all of this is having full visual control, even if you can't necessarily see a rolling start.
Thank you. Next question, George Stanov. You have a question?
Thanks, Serge. Ian, the starters team is part of the larger group of the finish line officials as well. And I was wondering what communications there are between the starting team and the finish line officials.
Typically, that is handled through the starter's assistants. So there's a whole, if you look at the start coordinator on the start guidelines by World Athletics, you'll see a whole bunch of different tasks. And timing is one, wind gauge is another, announcing, and so on. So there's a whole series, and one of those is the photo finish. And most meets, of course, we've got the photo finish. Well, I guess pretty well any meet now that's a provincial or above will have a photo finish. And typically it's a starter assistant that will have a radio or some other way of communicating with photo finish. So the photo finish will know what race, who's in it, and so on. And once the starter assistant has all of that recorded, then they will signal the starter that all are ready.
Thank you.
Gilles Rochette, that's your turn.
Yes, that's me again, Ian. It's happened to me a couple of times that as a start referee has been asked to join a discussion about a false start. Is it a false start or not? And the start team invited me, to give my advice or my comments. So you mentioned clearly earlier today that the referee is not part of the start team. So should I accept or not accept the invitation to have a discussion in order to determine or not if it's a false start?
No. You may listen in. You may be basically the starter needs to make a decision. After the decision is made, then you can decide on the fact relating to the start. So in other words, you can overrule, but they need to first of all make a decision, and you should not be part of that decision. It is, you're putting yourself at jeopardy if you make comments, then you're influencing the decision of the start team, and that's not your job. It's the job is once the start team has decided, only then can you step in.
Okay, so I did wrong in the past, so I will notice that. I'll pay attention, and I'll stay out of the discussion in the future.
Yeah.
Jim, Beck, or Donna, you have a question? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Donna.
Donna, sorry.
Thank you. Hi, Ian and Serge.
Hi,
Ian, I just
Donna.
wanted to, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time. I just wanted to go back to the question about the SIS setup before a meet. And I've only been involved in a very few number of meets that used it. Each time there was a completely separate technical team that brought the equipment in, set it all up, and then we as the starters went over it with them. And I'm wondering if there is ever a time that the start team itself would have to get the equipment, set it all up by themselves, and run it by themselves.
That, to my knowledge, that does not happen. Starters are not, they do not have the technical knowledge.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, they don't. So basically between the technical people that are responsible for setting it up and the start referee to check it and make sure that it's operating, the rest, the only thing the start team has left to do is if they get a signal to recall.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. I'm intimidated by the setup, but thank you very much for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Aisa Friday, you have a question? Ask the question.
Yes, hi. Could you explain the zero control test and how you know that's acceptable?
You broke up a little bit there, but it's with regards to
the zero
control test.
Oh, the zero control test, yes. What happens is the zero control test shows the basically, and Serge, you're familiar with this too. It's conducted in conjunction with the photo finish chief judge. So what happens is you place the start signal, the pistol, on the finish line, and you fire the start signal or the gun, and you record the image of, typically it's the flame on the finish line, and then you have the transducer next to the pistol, and then the photo finish will be able to tell what the time is of that, the flash of the pistol. And it has to be less than 0.001 seconds. And that's, as I say, that's determined by the people setting up the photo finish. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question here. We have a problem with Bruce Burton. I will ask a question. At York University, I often see athlete move into a 3-point stand at the set command, but I am yet to see anyone signal a full start. And these are experienced starter.
Not allowed. When even with the younger athletes, I always say 2-point. In other words, standing start, or you have a 4-point or a crouch start. Never a 3-point. The only time you'll see a 3-point start is with masters. Masters can do just about anything, but definitely not true for other athletes. And if I'm starting and I see it happen, I just don't start. It's just stand up and you give them the instructions that you need. It's a crouch start if you're using blocks, or a standing start if you're not. Okay. So
just a moment. I'm trying to find out this question. David Wicker, do you have a comment?
Yes, just a comment on your last point, Ian. It's masters, but it's also para-athletes.
Oh, right.
Again, para-athletes are quite unique. Another comment, Alicia, if you want to know more about zero control test, you'll have to participate in the webinar on photo finish.
June 15. Ian Fisher, I think you're holding your question or something. If you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you're referring to me. Yeah, this is Ian Reed from Toronto.
Sorry.
Yeah, so sorry, two items. One related to Bruce's comment about, or a question about starts at York. Being from Toronto, I highly suspect this is a masters competition he's referring to. If not, I would really be interested in knowing who the experienced starters are, because everyone that I'm familiar with in the Toronto area is aware of that rule. Second item is a question. On your starts referee part, you talked about the starts referee should position themselves very close to the starter so as to be able to have very quick ease of communication. Is that much more of a hard recommendation, or just your personal opinion on that? Like, is there any guidance from WA on positioning the starts referee as opposed to having them perhaps, let's say, on the opposite side of the track in 100 meters, for example, so that they have an additional perspective on the starts as opposed to exactly what the chief starter has?
What I typically will wind up doing, the starter will be in one vantage point. I frequently will have a different vantage point, but I'm going to be within maybe 10 meters or so. Very frequently, I'll position myself behind the blocks, especially if there's nobody back there, just because I will see bucks and twitches, and that tends to be a problem. Or I've also seen people maybe 5 or 10, well, maybe 5 or 10 meters further back from the track, from the starter. Again, slightly different viewpoint, but the key is to be close to the starter, so in case there is any misconduct, or if the starter's got any questions, you need to be able to resolve the issue very quickly. Now, and it's just something that I think not only a personal preference, but if you look at any of the diagrams that have come out with from World Athletics on any of their championship meets, you will see diagrams that their start referee will be actually pretty fairly close to the starter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do we have another person who have a question? I think when Dave Keenan, yeah.
Sure, okay. Ian, maybe could you address external noises that may affect the start, and sometimes trying to hear them, we're so focused on the race itself, we may not hear them where other athletes may. If you could address that.
Yeah, obviously there does need to be quiet at a start. There can be, it's a camera click is notorious for sometimes starting a race, and that's where added input is sometimes really nice to have from people like umpires and so on. I've known of, like within the Butterdome where we've both worked, where a pole vault bar has come down just about the same time as the start was going to take place, and somebody has started, and start team wasn't aware, but an umpire was, and so on. So yeah, your point's well taken. That and that's where, as a recall starter, I will try and leave the where possible one earplug out, the one that's away from the gun that I'm holding, so that I can hear better. Especially if I'm on the far side of the track. So there are a variety of different techniques, but yeah, it certainly you need to be aware.
Thanks, Ian.
Gilles Rochette has a question.
Yeah, that's me again, Ian. You just send me the invoice. Say I'll pay the bill right now, right away. I have often debated with my teammates about the ammunition, what kind of caliber to use for a national championship. Okay, it depending where you're traveling, depending, with who you're working. I often saw different kinds of ammunitions that we use. So is there any unwritten rule that we have to follow when it's time to use ammunition for national championships? Is it 32 caliber? Is it 22 caliber long sleeves, etc.? What kind of ammunition could we have to use for that kind of meet?
There's nothing that I'm aware of. And I know what you're saying. Some people like the louder sound and so on. And to tell the truth, locally and in Alberta, all I've ever used is the, or for the last several years, is the Alpha, the 209, the shot shell, and I have never had a problem with it. And I have basically not had any complaints, and we used that, as you're probably aware, at the 2016 Olympic trials that you were at.
Yeah, I remember using the 209 for sure, but the year after I used a 32 in Ottawa. Same thing in Montreal last year. So depends.
Yeah, and I really don't think that it makes a significant difference. I've had some correspondence about a louder sound, and you're too far away to have a startle effect. And if you don't have a startle effect, then it probably doesn't really matter a lot, as long as they hear.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, it's at least cheaper if you use 209 instead of a 32 caliber, right?
It sure is.
Okay, thank you.
Ian Reid, you did have your hand raised, or the question was asked?
Yeah, that was I went just a couple of people ago.
Okay, let's go. Scott, you have a question? Just unmute yourself and.
Yes. First, I'd just like to say hi to Carl Cummings and Darren Bois that I see on the line. I've recently moved to Brunswick and are old friends. I got a couple questions. One is, what do you mean by rolling start? What do you mean by bucking? Do you have any kind of loose definition of those terms, just so I get an idea?
You said rolling start. What was the other one?
And bucking. You've been using the term bucking.
Okay. Yeah. Rolling start. So if at the start you come up into your set position and you're still, and then after that you start rolling forward so that you are moving, your legs are starting to extend, your back is moving forward, your shoulders are moving forward. So you have a forward component of motion. So do you understand now?
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
Okay. And what that will do is
You may not trip the blocks, but you get that forward momentum.
You've got forward momentum. You will also have a faster, you'll be out of the blocks faster. So it becomes very unfair to everybody else. And if you had the start information system, you may not even see that signature on the blocks, because you're not putting any pressure on the blocks. You're just slowly moving forward, rolling forward. A buck is just the terminology is, so somebody comes up and then has a quick movement, up and down movement. They don't leave the blocks. It typically is more than just, for instance, a back leg twitching. Although that could be it, but basically somebody with a strong buck is actually really moves up and down quite forcefully, and and then frequently we'll just stop where they started from. So
Great. Thank you.
you're welcome.
The other question I have is you're mentioning 3-point starts not allowed, which I've sort of heard, and I've seen starters allow it for young athletes, like U12, U10, run, jump, throw athletes. But so does that still, and of course it doesn't apply to masters and para as previously mentioned, but for these young athletes that don't want to crouch start, or their coach never had them crouch start, can you then allow a standing start instead of a 3-point start?
Yes, it's something that.
Sorry, in the sprint distances is what I
mean. Yeah. With the was it U14 and younger? In Alberta, we do not allow blocks, period. And what we do is we say either 2-point, in other words, standing start, or a crouch start without the blocks. So those are, and we're fairly, so we do not allow a 3-point, but that's what we allow. And we're, when it comes to balance and that type of thing, some of them are not very steady and so on. So we have a lot of latitude, but that's what we do here in Alberta. But you have to also remember the World Athletic rule book is written for U20 and U18, and below that we've got complete latitude as to what rules we use.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
What I could add on that is it's preferred to go to see your branch rules. Sometimes competition, the branch will add some. We know that in Quebec we allow the 3-point stand, but midget and under. But you see that's different.
But Serge, Gilles speaking, if I can intervene with that one. The 3-point stand in Quebec won't be allowed anymore in a few months. I've been told that by the coach of the Quebec team.
Okay, that's strange, but and see that you need to refer to your branch people to verify if the rule is affect a 3-point, 2-point, or 4-point stand or block, whatever. And as was saying, Ian, is until youth category and up. That means that's the rule book is there. Under that, it's a pretty open. I would say anything.
Yeah. So that the U18, U20, and open categories are certainly covered by World Athletics rules, and the rest they're basically up to the branches, and that's where, as you say, different provinces have different rules, and you need to check with your branch.
Okay. If there's no more question, we're going to wrap that. I want to thank first Ian Gordon to that webinar. Thank you, again with the knock, and also that just want to two things. To emphasize that I'm going to send you a homework, but is 5 minutes homework is on a survey on the webinar to improve ourselves, and also if you have any topic you want to add during the summers, please don't hesitate to put that. Third thing, don't forget that we have another seminar Thursday with the World Athletic rule of change with James Armstrong's. Already we have 105 people registered to the webinar. James, I hope that you're you're in shape. And also that, and we're kind of open to have more people there. And we're going, hopefully that seminar was good for you, and hoping to see you somewhere and to go and to see you on the track, hopefully this year, hopefully. And if you have anything else to say or question on the webinar, not on the COVID-19, I'm not a specialist. I'm not asking, and don't ask me when the track will start. That's not the question I will answer. I have no answer for you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks, everybody. It was
a lot,
a
Ian. That's
pleasure
great.
and an
Thank
honor
you.
for me. Thank you very much.
Ian.
Thank you very much, Ian.
See you.
Thanks much.
Hey, Tom Norton.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian and Serge.
Thank you, James. We'll see you Thursday.
Thank
For
you
sure.
both, fellas.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ian.
Thanks, everyone.